Hey guys, welcome to a quick tutorial video on the Behringer Powerplay 16 or P16 personal monitoring mixer. We're going to talk about all of the key functionalities of this mixer, and we're going to talk about some of the best practices to get you the absolute best mix for your in-ear monitors. So let's jump into it. We're going to jump right in here and talk about the layout. First, we have 16 channels across the bottom of the console, and we have these labeled for all the channels that we specifically use. You can select these channels by just clicking the button, and the red indicator indicates which channel you're currently on. Moving up from there, we have our main channel. All 16 channels pass through the main and then out to the final output. You can solo a channel if you want to listen to a channel specifically without anything else to see exactly what that channel sounds like. So you could highlight channel 6 and listen to it. We have a mute where you can mute channels if you want. And then we have the left and right pan and balance. The way this would work is if you're using a stereo mix, you could pan things to your left ear, pan things to your right ear, or keep things in the center where the green is. Next, you have your volume per channel. So channel 4 volume, you would turn it. And something to note about volume is if you click the button in, so if you push in on the button, it will turn that channel on and off completely. So if you go to a channel, you're finding the volume isn't working, you can't hear anything, just click it, it'll bring it back to life. And then you can use this level for how loud or quiet it is. Of course, the bottom is low volume, and as you climb to the top, that would be very, very high volume. Across the next line, we'll go to our setup group here. We have link and group, and these are features we don't commonly use on the P16 in our personal setup. Link allows you to connect channels. Let's say that 5 is the left-hand channel of something. It's a stereo input, so maybe we have a left and a right. You could link channel 5 and 6 together. So whatever changes you make to 5 or 6 will apply to both channels. They will be linked together and stick together. So if you turn up 5, it also turns up 6 and it makes them stick together as stereo, but we don't have it configured that way, so ignore that. Group would allow you to put, say, you're the drummer, and you don't need to mix the vocals individually. You have them just kind of generally where you want. You could group the vocals together and turn them all up and down together once you get them set how you like. Recall allows you to recall your settings, and store allows you to store the settings. And we'll go back over that at the end. Equalizer is how you would control the tone and sound of each individual channel, including the main output. The way the equalizer works is you have the lows or the bass, the mids or everything in the middle, a frequency control knob that applies to the mids. What that means is you can change where this is focusing at, and then the treble, which is the highs. We have the limiter knob, which helps protect your hearing and give you a little bit of control that way. Then we have our final level output to send out to your ears, and you just turn your volume up and down. Okay, let's talk about each individual output. And so looking at the console here, we have 2 things we're going to focus on. We're going to look at a vocal channel, and we're going to look at our tracks channel. And we'll use these to demonstrate the functionality of everything. It's important to note that everything passes through the main, and that includes the equalizer. So everything that applies to these channels could also apply to your main. All right, so let's take a look at each of these individual channels and how the equalizer and other settings will control exactly how they sound and they function. So starting with let's go to vocal 3, and I have a vocal isolated here, so I'm going to turn it up to where we can start to hear it.
All hail King Jesus, all hail.
So that sounds pretty good, but let's look at how the equalizer will affect this channel. It's important to note that if you don't see any lights currently lit up on the equalizer, you are not actually adjusting anything. The way that these knobs work is they are turn to catch. What that means is when we open this EQ, this knob may have been over here in its settings. Now, these are not motorized knobs, so it wouldn't jump back to that position. What we first need to do is turn it down to that position, then it will lock on to where it was, and then we're actually manipulating it. The best practice for this, if you feel like you need to adjust the EQ, is to sweep the channel until the light turns on. So let's look at a different channel so I can get a good example of this. And they're all apparently, let me turn this one down. So now when I come here, that light went off. What I have to do is turn it to the middle and the light will turn on. And now I am affecting that EQ. If I go back here, the light is off. So I have to turn it down until the light turns on. And now I'm affecting that EQ. So essentially sweeping it means that you will ensure that you are grabbing the EQ. Then you can go back to the middle and start over. That's the practice that I use and the practice that I recommend. And let's look at how each of these affects the channel. So I'm going to turn the channel back up a bit. What we're going to do is I'm going to turn the bass up and down and listen to how it affects this specific channel.
In a dark cold tomb, where our Lord was laid.
So there's not much bass in this channel, so not a lot is happening here. But let's look at the mid.
We're forever saved. All
Now let's look at the frequency knob and how that affects. I'm going to turn this all the way up. And I'm going to spin this.
All hail the Lord of heaven and earth. All hail King Jesus.
And then the treble.
All hail the Savior of the world. All hail King Jesus.
So what's really happening here is if there were bass in this track, and we'll pull to a track in a second that does have bass to demonstrate this a little better, the bass would be turned up and down. The mid is between the bass and the treble. And what this frequency knob does is it determines where you are on the scale between bass and treble. So let's say that your vocal sounds really muddy or muffled. It's not very clear. You're having a hard time hearing yourself out of the mix. Everything is jumbled together, and it especially sounds really muddy or muffled, like you're speaking through your hand or something. What you would want to do is grab the mid and turn it down, and then you'll grab the frequency and move it around slightly until you find the sound that is kind of driving that muddiness. So if it has a very mid tone to it, you could bring this down maybe somewhere in here, then all of a sudden that tone that's driving and sounding muddy will start to dissipate, and you'll realize your vocal's getting a lot clearer. You could also add some treble to the top end, which will bring clarity and air to your mix. So this is kind of up high, like breathy air sounds that bring a lot of clarity and high-end resonance. And if your vocal sounds really bassy and muddy, you can also bring the bass down as well. So if it sounds muddy and dirty, you want to turn these down and then move this around to find the best middle, and then treble up a little bit, and that will bring clarity to your voice. If something sounds sharp or painful, maybe the click sounds a little too bright and a little too sharp, then you would want to bring the treble down, and it would take some of that top edge off the click. If that doesn't do it, you could turn the frequency of the middle all the way up or somewhere in here and bring the mids down. Now you're kind of in a a low treble setting. If you're all the way at the top of this frequency range, you're right at the bottom of this range. So you're kind of continuing on. If you turn this down and it still feels too bright, turn this up and this down and you'll get it. So if that makes sense, over here is the top of where the bass ends. Over here is the bottom of where the treble ends. So let's listen to a full track. This will have a full band, and you'll see exactly how the EQ will affect that. I'm going to twist these knobs, make sure they're all lit up so I'm in the right position, and let's take a listen. So here's the bass. Here's the mid. I'm going to turn it down, and I'm going to sweep it. And notice how as I turn this, certain things stand out in the mix and other things disappear. As I get about right here, the bass really starts to come out. And the reason for that is that a lot of instruments live in this range. And so you're turning down a lot of the tonality and a lot of the presence of most of the instruments, guitars, pianos, that sort of thing. And of course the treble is going to make it very bright, or a little bit less clear. So that's how the equalizer is going to affect your mix. It's very important, and it's a very incredible tool to help clarify your mix, to remove muddy tones, and to help your vocals or click or whatever you really need to focus on stand out. Another thing is to create space in the mix. So let's say that you're using stereo monitors. Now in our setup at our church, our vocal wireless packs are mono, so this is not applicable to any of our vocalists. However, most of our musicians plug directly into this pack. If you are plugged in with a cable, then you should be in the headphone port receiving stereo. And what you can do is you can move things around a little bit. So let's say we have an acoustic player and electric guitar player. What I like to do is move the acoustic a little bit left and the electric guitar a little bit right. And that helps turn it down a little bit because it's moving it in my headspace. And now my vocals are right in the middle. And so that helps my vocals to stay centered and I can hear myself a little bit better. Also, if I find that I'm losing the click, what I'll tend to do is I'll move the click a little bit to the left, and that will help it to cut through on my left ear a little bit better. And I'll move my tracks a little bit to the right. That helps create a little bit more separation and space. And then that way I can hear what's happening a little bit more clearly. Now, here's a couple of other things that are really important to remember. The limiter knob is one knob that continuously throws people off. So I want you to think of the limiter as a lid. It's like closing down the final volume, and that's why it's under the output tab. If you turn the limiter on, it is limiting the volume output that can go on, but think of it like a lid. And if your vocal is the loudest thing in the mix, it's going to hit the lid first and get turned down first. Wherever your limiter is, the volume cannot go past that level. And there's not really indicators here, but to the right, all the way is like taking the lid off. There is no limiting happening when it's fully to the right or turned all the way up. So now the limiter is off. As I bring it down, I'm pulling the lid down and I'm closing the limiter and I'm limiting the volume, which will turn the volume down. But it's not actually adjusting the volume level. It is instead creating a lid. And if you have different volume levels of different tracks, it's going to smash the top tracks down. Whatever is loudest is going to get turned down. Whatever is quietest will start to equal whatever is loudest. So if you ever find that you're trying to crank yourself up, I can't hear myself, I can't hear myself, you're turning it up louder and louder and the limiter is on, you're actually not adjusting your volume at all because your channel is being limited out. Everything else is staying the same and your channel isn't changing because you're pushing up against that lid. Let me demonstrate this so you can get a picture of what I'm talking about. So I'm going to turn the tracks up. I'm going to turn the vocal back up. I'm going to bring the limiter down. Now, no matter how loud I turn this up, it doesn't change. Once the limiter starts to activate, you'll see that light turn on. Once the limiter starts to activate, it doesn't matter how loud I turn it up. It's not getting any change right here because I'm pushing up against the limit. Now let's say that I turn my vocal all the way up. That's what I want to hear is my vocal. And I turn the tracks down. So I can hear my vocal pretty good right here, and the tracks are very quiet. But I am touching on the limiter, so watch as I turn this up. Now it sounds really crunchy. And my vocal's not actually getting louder anymore. So that's how the limiter works. It can be a useful tool to protect your ears and to help keep things a little bit more equal, but you have to remember that it is the ceiling of your volume, like putting a lid on your volume. So the more you turn it up, the more it's going to stop whatever is being turned up. That includes this output level, that includes your main level, and that includes every track. Everything passes through the limiter. So that's how the limiter works. Use it wisely. If you find your click is just a little too loud, it's hurting your ears, or it's just pushing at the top, but everything else feels good, limiting this might work because it might just bump the click down gently and settle it into the mix. A limiter can really help protect your ears from any sudden loud noises. So it's good to use, but you have to use it correctly. Otherwise, it will absolutely smash and destroy your mix. So last but not least, we're going to talk about storing and recalling scenes. This is a very simple process, and there are 16 banks available for you to store and recall. Now, when I go to store, I can see where I'm at currently. So I'm on channel 5. And I can decide, okay, I want to store on channel 6. I like my mix. I worked hard on it. I want to store channel 6. So let me click on channel 6. It starts to flash red. I know that that means this is the one I'm about to save. It's kind of a, are you sure? I click again, and now I have stored on channel 6. When I go to hit recall, it's going to show me that I am currently on channel 6. So if last week I stored on channel 4 and I knew that, I could go to channel 4 and recall it, and now I'm listening to the channel 4 mix. If I get my mix just right, I find that I really like how everything sounds. I can go back to store. It's going to show me that I'm on 4 right now. Let me store on 7. When I go to recall, I see I'm on 7 right now, but let me go back to 4. So to store, you click once, it'll kind of give you an are you sure? You say yes, I am sure. To recall, you can select any channel you want and it will change our mix. So let's play around with this a little bit. So let's go to our mix. I'm going to turn it back up a bit. I'm going to turn the tracks off. I'm going to turn just the vocals up. And I'm going to store this on 1. So that's just my vocal mix. Okay, now I'm going to go back to my tracks and turn them back up. I'm going to store on channel 2. So that's my vocal and tracks mix. Now let me flip between the two to show you how it works. I'm going to go to recall, and I can actually hear the different options as I'm clicking through it. So now as I hold recall and click 1 and 2, I can see this is my vocal mix. This is my tracks mix. Oh, that's the one. That sounds right. Let's go with that. Then I make some changes. Tracks were a little too loud. At the end of the day, I usually use channel 1, so I'm going to store over channel 1. Select it again, channel 1. An important practice, I think, is to inform or even label up here who might have what channel saved on the console. So say you have a pool of bass players, you have 3 or 4, they're all sharing the same console. They can choose a number and stick with it and ask others, please don't change my mix on number 7. This can work as you can save your mix from week to week, and then you only need to make small adjustments based on who's playing and who's singing that week. Instead of starting from scratch, you'll at least have a baseline to start out with. So that is the Powerplay 16, all of the details. And if you have any questions, let me know in the comments or send me a message.